Over the past 50 years, excavations at a Middle Bronze Age village on Ustica, north of Sicily, have provided numerous insights into the everyday lives of the community that lived there. Now, using non-invasive technologies, researchers have identified an additional section of what was a substantial fortification system. In this video, I discuss the history of this site as well as this recent discovery. Most of the information I'm giving you on Ustica comes from the paper where the latest study is discussed. This was published recently in the Journal of Applied Geophysics. The island of Ustica is located around 65 kilometers north of Palermo in Sicily. It was formed by submarine volcanic activity during the Middle Pleistocene. Subaerial effusive and hydromatic explosive activity then continued for 400,000 years. The landscape of the island is dominated by the remnants of three extinct volcanic buildings: Monte Guardia del Turchi, Monte Costa del Fallo, and Falconiera. Other interesting geological characteristics are marine terraces that formed over the past 350,000 years because of eustatic sea level changes. Since there are no perennial springs or rivers on Ustica, water has been in short supply for its inhabitants since prehistoric times, but that hasn't stopped people living there. The earliest evidence for human habitation on the island dates back to the Neolithic, with the oldest site having been found on the summit of Perozza in the southwest. Three Neolithic pottery styles dating to between the 6th and 4th millennium BCE were found there: Stentinello, Trichrome, and Diana. At Piano dei Cardoni in the south, another Neolithic site was identified by its pottery sherds, which belong to the types classified as Cerro d'Alto and Diana. These date between the mid and late 5th millennium BCE. Moving into the Enolithic period, pottery sherds belonging to the conquered Doro style have been unearthed as well. By the early Bronze Age, people had settled on the eastern slope of Monte Guardia del Turchi, where they built a village and rock-cut tombs. At that time, a type of pottery known as impasto was in use, and this was decorated in the style called Capograziano, named after a Bronze Age site on the Aeolian island of Filicudi to the east. During the Middle Bronze Age, the population of Ustica increased substantially. The Villaggio dei Faraglioni, or Faraglioni Village, dates to this time period, with its construction beginning around 1400 BCE. It's located on the north coast on top of a marine terrace. The cliffs it's situated on are approximately 20 meters in height, so created a natural defense from the north. Excavations over the last 5 decades have revealed a fortified wall measuring 250 meters in length on the south side of the village, which encloses an area of around 7,000 square meters and would have accommodated hundreds of people. This defensive architecture is similar to other Bronze Age sites. For example, in Malta, the Bordieta San George village near Dingley was also built on a cliff edge with a fortified wall defending its inland side. There's very little left of this wall, but there are substantial remains of another inland fortified wall at the Bronze Age village that was built near the earlier Neolithic temple of Borj in Nadur. According to the paper, finds from the Faraglioni village on Ustica show that the inhabitants sustained themselves through fishing, agriculture, animal husbandry, and craftsmanship. Evidence such as ceramics suggests that the villagers traded with other Bronze Age societies in the Mediterranean, including the Thapsos culture that lived on mainland Sicily and the Apennine culture on the Italian peninsula. A Mycenaean pottery sherd and some glass paste beads hint at connections as far afield as the Aegean. The inhabitants of the Faraglioni village probably had a relationship with other Middle Bronze Age settlements on Ustica, but it's not clear to what extent these relationships existed. Talking of Thapsos, the Paolo Orsi Museum in Syracuse, which I visited many times, has an amazing collection of artifacts from the Thapsos village. Interestingly, when the Italian archaeologist and classicist Paolo Orsi, who the museum in Syracuse is named after, discovered Thapsos, he saw strong similarities between that village and the Mycenaean culture in Bronze Age Greece. Since then, experts have suggested that the amount of imported goods from Mycenae discovered there, alongside locally produced pottery, may indicate a Greek colony with a mixed population. I need to read up more on this though, because I don't know what the general consensus amongst experts is on that. As I've mentioned in previous videos, obsidian was popular in the ancient world for making tools. Sources of obsidian are limited to just a few places in the Mediterranean. However, it has been found at numerous Neolithic sites, which shows that sea travel and trade took place 5,000 years ago. I'm using the word trade loosely because how Neolithic cultures were connected isn't really clear. During the Bronze Age, the use of obsidian was vastly reduced in Sicily. However, at the Faraglioni Village, several hundred fragments of it from Lipari and Pantelleria have been found. The curved fortified wall that remains partially intact at the Faraglioni Village stretches for 250 meters. It's 2.5 meters in height, but would probably have been around 4 or 5 meters tall originally. The construction technique involved building 2 parallel walls with large stone blocks and then filling the space in between them with smaller stones. Along its perimeter, 13 towers were built. These were spaced out at fairly regular intervals of between 12 and 16 meters. Its inner side has a walkway, and between this walkway and the village dwellings, there are the remains of a path. The settlement itself had a similar layout to that found at Thapsos on mainland Sicily, with 1 meter wide streets and hut dwellings. Some huts were circular, as was common in Bronze Age settlements across the Mediterranean, and some were square. Made of dry stone walls, they were grouped around shared central courtyards, another common feature of Bronze Age villages. In these courtyards, food storage containers and large jars for collecting rainwater were found. There's some debate as to how many huts actually existed. Some researchers think there were less than 100, others think they ran into the hundreds. Due to the crumbling cliff, there's also the possibility that some of the huts were lost due to erosion. From inside the remains of the huts, archaeologists have found ceramic vessels for both dining and storage. Some of these are similar in style to those excavated from the Middle Bronze Age Milazesa village on the Ionian island of Panarea. They are made up of cone-shaped bowls seated on high pedestals. Stone molds and casting bronze tools were also found in the village, which suggests a workshop was there as well. In the latest study, the researchers carried out geophysical surveys using both ERT, which means electric resistivity tomography, and GPR, which means ground penetrating radar. Much of the paper goes into scientific detail on these surveys. I'm not going to do that, but if you are interested in such intricate information, the article is open access and referenced in the description below. Prior field research and aerial photography had indicated a semi-buried structure might exist outside the partially extant fortified wall. Boulders could be seen roughly following the curve of the inner wall, but they were not present the whole distance. Experts thought there was a possibility that, rather than being part of a semi-buried structure, the boulders had rolled there from the fortified wall itself. The geophysical survey showed that the boulders did in fact belong to an outer wall that followed the curve of the inner wall and was between 6 and 7 meters distant from it. The surveys also showed that a more complex tower labelled as structure number 12, which had been identified during previous excavations in the northern section of the inner wall, appears to have been connected to the outer wall as well. This tower is made up of 2 semicircular buildings, one within the other, enclosed by a quadrangular structure. The double fortification wall is similar to that found at the Rocca Middle Bronze Age settlement near Lecce on the Italian peninsula. However, at Rocca, the 2 walls were joined by a corridor and there was a main gate. Further research will need to be done at Faraglioni to see if such structures also existed there. The village was suddenly abandoned around 1200 BCE, with household items remaining in their places. It's not clear why it was abandoned. There are several hypotheses, including a natural disaster, an attack, a drought, and an epidemic. On a side note, when I've read papers on the abandonment of prehistoric sites or the decline of Bronze Age civilizations, most experts don't think the reason is so clear-cut. A number of factors may have played a role in such societal collapses. The authors of the paper concluded with saying that further non-invasive research at the site may help to finally answer the question of why it was abandoned, and may also help to clarify the evolution of the village during the 200 years it was inhabited. That's it. If you enjoyed this video, please hit the like button. Thank you to my patrons, channel members, and super chatters, and I'll see you next time.